The observation dome had been designed to humble visitors. Its transparent ceiling stretched nearly 400 meters overhead, revealing the endless darkness between the stars. Beyond the reinforced crystal, dozens of warships drifted in perfect formation around the orbital capital of the Asterian Collective, their silver hulls glowing beneath the light of a blue giant star. Every surface of the chamber reflected wealth, confidence, and 8 centuries of uninterrupted galactic dominance. The architects wanted every new civilization to understand one thing before negotiations even began. You are entering our universe now. Commander Elena Ward noticed something else. She noticed there were no windows facing Earth. The thought lingered only for a second before diplomats approached, cameras hovered into position, and translators activated across the enormous circular hall. Today was supposed to be history. 43 years after humanity's first faster-than-light voyage, Earth had finally been invited to sign the Accord of Stellar Membership, a treaty that promised unrestricted trade, scientific exchange, and recognition as a sovereign interstellar civilization. Thousands of reporters across human space waited for the ceremony. Back on Earth, entire cities had gathered in public squares. Children waved banners. Teachers paused classrooms. Factories stopped production. For 1 hour, humanity had chosen celebration over work. Elena wished they hadn't. She adjusted the stiff ceremonial jacket pressing against her shoulders. She hated dress uniforms. Armor made sense. Armor expected danger. This uniform expected applause. The golden insignia on its collar caught the light every time she moved, reminding her she no longer looked like a soldier. She looked like decoration. Across the chamber stood High Marshal Kaler, commander of the Collective Defense Directorate. He greeted every delegate with the same practiced smile. Perfect posture. Perfect courtesy. Perfect confidence. Elena had spent the last 11 months watching that smile through negotiations. Today it was different. Not larger. Not warmer. Easier. It was the expression of someone who had already seen tomorrow. She stored the observation away without changing her face. People lied with words. Bodies usually told the truth. Around the immense treaty platform, representatives from 17 member species took their assigned places. Crystal-winged diplomats. Towering reptilian scholars. Pale synthetic envoys whose expressions never changed. Every civilization that mattered, according to the collective, had sent witnesses. The room should have been loud. Instead, it was controlled. Measured. Every movement happened exactly when protocol demanded. Too exactly. Elena slowly scanned the chamber. Then she found the first problem. Security. Collective ceremonies always stationed honor guards beside the entrance as a symbolic gesture of welcome. She had memorized their diplomatic customs months ago. The guards weren't at the entrance. They were standing beside every exit. 48 of them. Combat armor. Weapons carried low. Not ceremonial. Ready. Interesting. She continued looking. The journalists occupied their assigned gallery. Musicians waited beside the eastern wall. Diplomatic aides stood exactly where protocol required. Nothing appeared wrong. Which was precisely why it bothered her. Her instructor at the Defense Academy had once said, "The most dangerous room isn't the one full of threats. It's the one missing something you expected to find." She looked again. Crew movement. An orbital station this large should have felt alive. Thousands of personnel should have been crossing corridors beyond the observation glass. Maintenance drones. Engineers. Servants. Security rotations. Instead, almost nothing. The station wasn't quiet. It was holding its breath. A young human diplomat leaned closer. "Nervous, Commander?" She smiled politely. Always. It wasn't entirely untrue. She had survived boarding actions, orbital sieges, and pirate ambushes. None of them had felt like this. Because battlefields announced themselves. This room smiled. Marshal Kaler stepped toward the treaty platform. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said warmly, "today marks the beginning of a new era." Applause echoed through the chamber. Elena clapped exactly twice. Nothing more. Her eyes drifted upward. Beyond the transparent ceiling, several defense satellites slowly adjusted position. Not dramatically. Just enough. As though receiving new firing solutions. Her pulse never changed. But inside her mind, another clock quietly started counting. Something was about to happen. And somehow, she already knew humanity had arrived exactly where someone wanted them. Applause echoed through the observation dome. It rolled across the polished floor, bounced from the curved crystal ceiling, and dissolved into the silence that always follows history. Marshal Kaler accepted the ceremonial stylus from an attendant. He glanced toward the cameras, toward the ambassadors, toward Earth's delegation. Then his eyes settled on Commander Elena Ward. He smiled. Not politely. Knowingly. For the first time since arriving on the station, Elena felt certain. This was not a treaty ceremony. It was the final move of a game someone else believed they had already won. Kaler lowered the stylus. His signature appeared across the treaty's holographic surface. The instant the final symbol was completed, everything changed. Not with explosions. Not with alarms. With silence. Every human communication display went black. The hovering news drones froze in midair before gently drifting toward the floor. Translation systems shut down. Private military channels disappeared. One by one. Every exit sealed itself. Heavy alloy doors slid shut with soft mechanical clicks that sounded almost polite. The guards moved. 48 rifles rose together. None pointed directly at the humans. Not yet. They simply rested in firing position. Prepared. Waiting. The human delegation exchanged confused glances. One senator stood halfway from his chair. What is the meaning of this? No one answered him. Kaler calmly placed the stylus back onto its stand. His expression never changed. Please remain seated. His voice carried effortlessly through the enormous chamber. There is no immediate danger. Elena noticed the wording. Not no danger. No immediate danger. A careful difference. Additional doors opened. Collective officers entered in disciplined formation. No rushing. No shouting. No panic. People who had rehearsed this. For years. Above them, beyond the transparent ceiling, dozens of orbiting warships rotated together. Blue weapon arrays slowly awakened. One after another. Then another. Then another. The stars themselves seemed to disappear behind rows of glowing cannons. The senator finally found his voice. This is a violation of interstellar law. Kaler regarded him almost sympathetically. It is not. He activated the treaty. Thousands of pages expanded into floating holograms. Most dissolved immediately until only a single section remained highlighted. Article 41. Subsection 9. Paragraph 3. Our legal teams translated this, Kaler said calmly. You translated it? He paused. Incorrectly. The paragraph reshaped itself into standard human. Elena read every word. Then read it again. Her stomach tightened. Upon ratification, member civilizations classified as emerging strategic species shall temporarily transfer all military authority to the Collective Security Directorate pending sovereign evaluation. Emerging strategic species. Temporary transfer. Pending evaluation. Simple words. Catastrophic meaning. Kaler continued. Your military assets now legally fall under collective administration. Another screen appeared. 18 human colony systems. One by one. Collective fleet symbols appeared above every world. Earth, Mars, New Carthage, Horizon, Kepler, Atlas. Every colony. Every fleet anchorage. Every shipyard. Occupied. Not invaded. Processed. Months of diplomacy had hidden a single sentence. One sentence was enough. The senator slammed both hands onto the table. This treaty was negotiated in good faith. It was. Kaler answered without emotion. We negotiated exactly what we intended. One ambassador whispered, My God. Elena remained perfectly still. She counted. 1 breath. 2 breaths. 3. Kaler noticed. His attention shifted away from the politicians. Toward her. You are Commander Elena Ward. I am. You command Earth's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. I do. I have already transmitted compliance orders to every human admiral. He watched her carefully. Our sensors indicate that most of your fleet has begun powering down. Most. Not all. A tiny word. An important word. Kaler smiled again. You, Commander, will remain aboard this station during the transition. A guest? Elena asked. If you prefer. Hostage. The room understood it without anyone saying the word. One diplomat began protesting. Another demanded legal review. Journalists desperately tried reviving dead equipment. Several officers quietly cried. The room fractured into fear. Only Elena stayed motionless. Kaler frowned ever so slightly. You appear remarkably calm. She met his eyes. I've learned something about victories. Oh. The people celebrating first. She let the sentence hang. Usually haven't counted everything. For the first time all day, Kaler's smile weakened. Only for a heartbeat. Barely noticeable. But Elena saw it. As collective officers escorted her toward the sealed exit, she looked once through the crystal ceiling. Across the darkness, human warships were shutting down exactly as ordered. Frigates, cruisers, carriers. Their weapon systems went dark one after another. To every observer in the galaxy, humanity had surrendered. Elena watched the last carrier extinguish its engines. Then, hidden beneath the sleeve of her ceremonial uniform, her fingers brushed the old mechanical watch strapped around her wrist. It ticked, steady, unchanging. She glanced at the time. A single thought crossed her mind. The bunker had no official name. On every government map, the desert above it was empty. On every military chart, the mountain beneath it didn't exist. 270 meters below the red sandstone of the Australian outback, Director Nathan Hale poured himself another cup of coffee that tasted as though someone had described coffee to a machine instead of actually making it. He drank it anyway. After 38 years, taste had stopped mattering. Timing hadn't. A wall-sized display counted down in silent blue numbers. 28 minutes and 16 seconds. 28 minutes. The operations room remained calm. No alarms. No shouting. Just dozens of analysts watching streams of information arrive from hidden sensor networks scattered across human space. The calm wasn't confidence. It was preparation. People became quiet when they had already rehearsed the worst outcome 1,000 times. A young systems engineer hurried toward Hale, carrying a digital tablet. Confirmation from all 18 colony sectors. Hale looked up. Population status? Complete. No exceptions? She shook her head. The last civilian convoy cleared New Horizons 6 hours ago. Hale allowed himself a slow nod. 2.6 million people. Moved across interstellar space over 8 months. No emergency declarations. No public panic. No suspicious fleet movements. Families had believed they were participating in infrastructure upgrades, medical relocations, mining contracts, educational exchanges. Very few knew they were quietly disappearing. Even fewer knew why. The collective believed it had surrounded humanity's colonies. In reality, it had surrounded empty cities. Hale stepped toward the central tactical display. 18 bright red symbols represented collective occupation fleets. Each sat precisely where the predictive models had expected. Almost. He leaned closer. Interesting. The engineer followed his gaze. What is it? The Fifth Fleet assigned 3 additional cruisers to Kepler. You predicted 2. I know. He smiled faintly. They're becoming slightly less predictable. She laughed. Should I be worried? No. He sipped his coffee. I'd be worried if they suddenly became imaginative. Across another screen, tiny green lights blinked one after another. Hidden listening posts. Thousands of them. Not satellites. Not probes. Rocks. Actual rocks. Over 20 years earlier, humanity had hidden microscopic sensor arrays inside drifting asteroids. No advanced camouflage. No impossible technology. Just ordinary space debris carrying extraordinary secrets. The collective never searched them. No advanced civilization would waste resources investigating random rocks. Human engineers had asked a different question. What if the rocks were watching? One analyst raised a hand. Commander Ward's signal is stable. Hale crossed the room. A simple waveform pulsed across the monitor. Tick, tick, tick. Nothing more. An ordinary mechanical wristwatch. Every movement of its balance wheel produced an almost invisible electromagnetic fluctuation. Too weak to attract attention. Too regular to ignore. For anyone who knew where to listen. Each pulse carried a message. Alive. Captured. Waiting. The engineer looked at the signal. I still can't believe this works. Hale smiled. Neither can they. That was the point. The collective searched for quantum transmitters. Encrypted bursts. Subspace communication. Artificial intelligence. Nobody searched for a watch built with 19th century engineering. Sophisticated civilizations often ignored simple solutions. Humanity never had. Another screen illuminated. Decoy fleet status. 211 aging ships floated exactly where collective surveillance expected Earth's Navy to be. Old cruisers. Converted cargo vessels. Retired carriers. Minimum skeleton crews. One after another, they powered down exactly as the occupation orders demanded. To every enemy sensor. Human resistance had ended. To Hale. The performance deserved applause. He checked the countdown again. 17 minutes and 42 seconds. The engineer folded her arms. Do you ever think about Geneva? Every person in the room knew what she meant. 38 years ago. 15 people. One locked conference room. Humanity's first intercepted alien transmission. The politicians had celebrated. The scientists had dreamed. The generals had worried. 15 people had reached the same conclusion before sunrise. The galaxy wasn't looking for partners. It was looking for managers. That morning, humanity had made a decision. Smile. Trade. Negotiate. Cooperate. Prepare. Quietly. For as long as necessary. Hale had been 29 years old. He was 67 now. Nearly 4 decades spent building plans no one hoped to use. The engineer interrupted his thoughts. 17 minutes. I know. She hesitated. Do you think Commander Ward is frightened? Hale looked again at the tiny pulse from her watch. Steady. Precise. Never missing a beat. No. He answered softly. I think she's relieved. Outside the bunker, the desert wind swept across empty stone as though nothing beneath it had changed in centuries. Deep below, humanity's real fleet waited in silence. Hidden behind moons. Inside asteroid fields. Within the shadows of gas giants. 216 warships invisible to every collective scanner. For 38 years they had prepared for one possibility. Tonight, someone else had activated it. Hale placed the empty coffee mug beside the console. The countdown reached 15 minutes. He looked around the room. No speeches. No dramatic orders. Only one sentence. Everyone. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. It's time. And across 18 occupied star systems, ghosts prepared to become visible. The first alert reached the Asterian Collective less than 4 minutes after the treaty was signed. It arrived as an ordinary logistics report. No emergency code. No priority classification. Just another line in a flood of routine military updates. Kepler colony, no civilian movement detected. Marshal Kaler barely glanced at it. Of course there wasn't. The colony had already surrendered. A second report appeared. New Horizon administrative teams unable to locate colonial governor. Normal. Governments always disappeared during occupations. A third followed. Ares Station civilian census incomplete. His operations officer frowned. That's unusual. Finish the census. Yes, Marshal. No one panicked. Not yet. Because every report, viewed individually, had a reasonable explanation. Only together. They formed a question no one had asked. Where was everyone? 3 light-years away, aboard the occupation flagship above Kepler, Colonel Varek walked through the colony's administrative district. Every streetlight functioned. Every transport line remained active. Apartments contained furniture. Tables were still set. Coffee cups rested beside open books. Children's toys lay scattered across public parks. The city looked alive. Except, there wasn't a single person. No bodies. No refugees. No resistance. Nothing. The silence felt deliberate. An officer approached. Sir. Varek looked over. We've searched Sector 9. And? Same result. The shelters. Empty. Hospitals. Empty. Transit stations? Empty. The officer hesitated. We found thousands of homes. But no people. Inside the underground command bunker, Director Nathan Hale watched 18 live feeds simultaneously. One after another. Occupation commanders entered abandoned cities. Human intelligence officers quietly updated the board. Kepler civilian evacuation confirmed. New Horizon no losses. Europa Station population secure. Ares occupation forces searching empty infrastructure. Someone laughed. Not because the situation was funny. Because 38 years of unbearable tension had finally produced visible results. Hale didn't laugh. He simply nodded once. They took the bait. Commander Elena Ward sat quietly inside her holding suite aboard the collective flagship. Her room was comfortable. Almost luxurious. A bed. A desk. A panoramic viewport. A prisoner treated politely remained a prisoner. She stood beside the window. Outside, human warships continued shutting down exactly as ordered. Destroyers, cruisers, supply vessels. Every transmission reinforced the illusion. Humanity was obeying. The guard outside her room relaxed slightly. He had started believing the danger was over. Exactly as intended. Elena smiled almost imperceptibly. The performance had to be convincing. Even now. Especially now. Back on the flagship bridge, Kaler received another report. His tactical officer looked uncomfortable. Marshal. Report. The colony governors cannot be located. They're hiding. Perhaps. The civilian registries also don't match. Kaler finally looked up. What do you mean? The population records indicate approximately. The officer swallowed. 2.6 million civilians. Kaler waited. We've confirmed fewer than 12,000. Silence. Another officer interrupted. Communications from Europa. Then another. And Mars Relay. Another. And New Carthage. Every report said the same thing. Infrastructure intact. Population. Gone. Kaler slowly stood. Run orbital thermal scans. They're already running. Life sign analysis. Completed. Subsurface shelters? Empty. For the first time all day, no one on the bridge spoke. The impossible answer slowly assembled itself. Not an evacuation during the occupation. An evacuation. Before it. Deep inside the bunker, another timer reached 0. A different screen illuminated. Phase 2 authorization. Nathan Hale looked around the operations room. Every officer already knew their assignment. No dramatic speeches were necessary. Preparation had replaced inspiration decades ago. He pressed one button. Nothing happened. At least, nothing visible. Across 18 star systems, encrypted signals hidden inside ordinary navigational beacons awakened simultaneously. Deep beneath asteroid fields, inside abandoned mining tunnels, behind frozen moons, massive reactors silently came online. Power levels climbed. Containment fields stabilized. Cloaking generators shut themselves down. Ghosts began becoming real. A young analyst stared at his display. Director. Hale didn't look away. I know. Every battle group reports ready. 216 warships. Invisible for years. Waiting. Watching. Now. Preparing to reveal themselves. Hale picked up his cracked coffee mug. The coffee was still terrible. He took a sip anyway. Let's see. He whispered. How the galaxy reacts when the species it underestimated stops pretending. The enemy command believed the battle had finally begun. Their admirals gave the order with absolute confidence. Every colonial system. Every mining world. Every shipyard. Every civilian logistics hub. Destroy them all at once. It was the oldest military doctrine in the galaxy. If you cannot defeat an empire's fleet, destroy the foundation that feeds it. Thousands of enemy warships accelerated toward humanity's outer colonies. Commanders smiled. This would end the war in a single day. Humanity would either surrender or watch every colony burn. On Earth, no alarms sounded. No panic spread through command centers. General Marcus Hale simply watched the tactical display. Then he quietly said, "Begin observation protocol." His officers didn't celebrate. They waited. Because this moment had been expected for years. The first enemy fleet entered firing range above Kepler colony. Orbital cannons locked. Missiles armed. Heavy plasma batteries charged. The countdown reached 0. Thousands of weapons fired together. The colony disappeared beneath a wall of light. For exactly 3 seconds. Everyone believed it was over. Then something impossible happened. Tiny signals began appearing across the debris surrounding the planet. One signal became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became 10,000. Then, millions. Small relay devices, each no larger than a human hand, activated simultaneously. Individually they were worthless. Collectively, they became something no military simulation had ever predicted. A living defensive network. Energy barriers expanded between the relay nodes faster than enemy targeting computers could calculate. Missiles vanished. Particle beams bent away. Railgun rounds shattered against invisible fields. The colony remained untouched. Enemy officers stared silently at their screens. No one understood what they were seeing. Then identical reports arrived. New Avalon. Protected. Titan Station. Protected. Europa shipyards. Protected. Mars Logistics Ring. Protected. Every human colony. Protected. The same impossible defense. The same invisible network. The same result. 0 successful strikes. The enemy launched stronger attacks. Nothing changed. Because there was no command center to destroy. No flagship controlling the network. No central computer. Every relay spoke only to its nearest neighbors. Destroy one. The others adapted. Destroy 1,000. The network simply flowed around the damage. The defense wasn't a machine. It behaved more like a living organism. Inside humanity's strategic command, Several young officers finally understood why supply ships had spent decades transporting insignificant cargo into asteroid belts. They hadn't been moving supplies. They had been planting the future. Every forgotten asteroid, every abandoned mining field, every debris cloud, had secretly become part of Earth's defensive web. Not one massive fortress. Millions of invisible pieces, hidden in plain sight. Enemy commanders immediately changed strategy. If the colonies cannot be destroyed, destroy the fleet. It sounded logical. Except humanity had expected that too. Long before the first battle, human captains had been trained to fight differently from every known navy. Alien fleets valued order, perfect formations, predictable command structures, synchronized movement. Human fleets valued uncertainty. Every captain operated independently. Every ship constantly shifted position. Every movement looked random. But together, the fleet covered space like a moving puzzle. Enemy targeting computers were always tracking where human ships had been, never where they actually were. 40 seconds. That tiny delay became catastrophic. In space warfare, 40 seconds was the difference between victory and complete failure. Enemy salvos struck empty space. Human ships appeared from impossible angles, then disappeared again. The attackers could never lock onto a battlefield, because humanity refused to create one. General Hale looked across the tactical board. Every prediction made over the last 35 years was unfolding exactly as planned. Not because humanity controlled the enemy, but because they understood how predictable power becomes when it has never truly been challenged. For the first time, the invaders realized something terrifying. They were no longer fighting desperate survivors. They were fighting a civilization that had spent an entire generation quietly preparing for exactly this war. The collapse of the invasion spread faster than any official report. 3 allied civilizations had already abandoned the coalition. Entire fleets had withdrawn without firing another shot. Senior commanders questioned their own orders. Captains argued across encrypted channels. For the first time in centuries, the enemy alliance no longer acted like one military. It acted like frightened governments trying to survive. Yet one fleet continued forward. The Home Guard, stationed around the enemy's oldest military command. Its commander, High Admiral Kaler, ignored every transmission calling for restraint. To him, retreat was betrayal. Orders were absolute. Earth remained the objective. If one fleet still stood between humanity and victory, then one fleet would fight. General Marcus Hale watched the tactical display in complete silence. Every movement matched predictions made years earlier. One last commander. One last offensive. One final attempt to prove authority still existed. His staff waited for firing authorization. None came. Instead, Hale opened a secure communication channel. Prepare lunar protocol. Every officer in the room stopped moving. The words had never been spoken outside classified planning sessions. Decades of preparation were about to become visible. The enemy fleet crossed into Earth's defensive perimeter. Sensors searched desperately for hidden battleships, carrier groups, planetary cannons. Anything. They found almost nothing. Earth looked strangely vulnerable. Blue oceans, white clouds, a peaceful planet. Exactly as intelligence reports had always described it. Then, every tactical screen inside the enemy fleet flashed red. Target lock detected. Another appeared. Then another. Within seconds, every ship received the same warning. Multiple weapon systems have acquired target. But no ships appeared. No stations. No satellites. Nothing. The targeting solution came from somewhere impossible. The moon. Confusion spread through every bridge. The scans must be wrong. Repeat verification. Impossible. The answers never changed. Every calculation pointed to the same object humanity had looked at for thousands of years. The moon itself. Not its surface. Its interior. Unknown power signatures awakened beneath kilometers of ancient rock. Energy levels climbed beyond anything recorded in galactic history. Massive reactor systems activated. Targeting arrays locked onto every hostile vessel simultaneously. No weapon fired. None had to. Every commander understood what the numbers meant. If those readings were real, there would be no surviving the first shot. High Admiral Kaler stared at his command display. His tactical officers waited for orders. Retreat? Jam the signals? Nothing worked. The targeting locks remained perfect. Constant. Unbreakable. Then Hale finally spoke across the open channel. You still have a choice. No threats. No celebration. Just one sentence. We built this because we hoped never to use it. Silence filled both fleets. The enemy expected arrogance. Instead, they heard restraint. That frightened them far more. Because civilizations hungry for conquest always use overwhelming power immediately. Only civilizations terrified of war build weapons designed to prevent one. Minutes passed. No ship moved. No missile launched. No cannon fired. Every captain waited for someone else to make the decision. Finally, one cruiser powered down its weapons. Then another. Then an entire squadron. The signal spread across the fleet like falling dominoes. Engines cooled. Weapon systems shut down. Targeting computers disengaged. One commander after another reached the same conclusion. Victory was impossible. Humanity could have destroyed them long ago. Instead, it had chosen patience. Inside Earth's command bunker, nobody cheered. The room remained almost silent. One officer whispered, "They're surrendering." General Hale slowly shook his head. "No. They're learning." For him, that difference mattered. Winning a battle created temporary peace. Changing an enemy's understanding could create generations of it. As the last hostile warship powered down its reactors, Hale finally allowed himself to sit. 35 years of hidden planning. Countless sacrifices. Sleepless nights. Secrets carried by thousands of people. None of it had been built to conquer the galaxy. It had been built so humanity would never again kneel before someone stronger. Outside, Earth remained exactly as it had always appeared. Quiet. Beautiful. Ordinary. Only now, the galaxy understood the truth. The most dangerous civilization had never been the one with the largest fleet. It was the one that prepared for peace, by ensuring no one could ever force it into war again. The shooting stopped. For the first time in nearly a year. No emergency alerts echoed across human colonies. No fleets accelerated toward battle. No commanders counted incoming missiles. Across 18 liberated systems, millions of people stepped out of emergency shelters. Children saw open skies again. Factories restarted. Trade lanes reopened. Families returned to homes they never believed they would see again. The war was over. But General Marcus Hale understood something few soldiers ever admitted. Winning a war was the easy part. Winning the peace would decide whether everything they had sacrificed actually mattered. 11 days after the final fleet powered down, delegations from 12 civilizations gathered aboard the largest diplomatic station in known space. The same council chambers that had once declared humanity a manageable species, now prepared to negotiate with an equal. Every ambassador expected the same outcome history had always produced. The victor would demand territory, military control, economic tribute, political obedience. That was how powerful civilizations behaved. It was the only model anyone knew. Sarah Voss entered the chamber carrying nothing except a thin data folder. No honor guard. No theatrical entrance. No speech prepared for history books. She simply took her seat. The silence lasted several seconds. Finally, the presiding chairman spoke. "State humanity's demands." Sarah looked around the chamber, then answered with one sentence. "We're here to end ownership." Confused expressions spread across the room. Several delegates exchanged uncertain glances. One ambassador quietly asked, "Ownership of what?" Sarah replied, "Of people." The room became perfectly still. She continued before anyone could interrupt. The treaty forced upon humanity was never diplomacy. It was control disguised as law. We're not here to replace one empire with another. We're here to make sure no civilization can ever do this again. The delegates waited. Surely more demands would follow. Military occupations, reparations, punishments. Instead, Sarah activated the display behind her. 4 proposals appeared. Equal legal recognition for every civilization. Independent governance of all member worlds. Freedom to expand without political domination. A mutual security charter protecting every member equally. That was all. No conquest. No tribute. No empire. The silence became almost uncomfortable. Several delegates reread the proposals. One finally asked, "Where are your territorial claims?" "We don't have any." "What compensation do you demand?" "None." "What punishment do you seek?" "We're not interested in revenge." The delegates struggled to process the answers. Every historical precedent said this was impossible. Power always demanded more power. Victory always created a larger empire. Humanity had just won the greatest military confrontation in modern galactic history, and wanted only to be left alone. 3 civilizations understood first. The nations that had abandoned the alliance before the final battle quietly endorsed humanity's proposal. They admitted something few governments ever admitted publicly. They had known the old system was broken. They had simply lacked the courage to oppose it alone. Humanity had given them that opportunity. One by one, their signatures appeared beneath the new charter. Others watched carefully. If the First Nations trusted humanity, perhaps they had misunderstood humans all along. The remaining coalition members resisted. Not because they hated humanity, because their economies had depended on the old order. Exclusive trade routes, special military privileges, political influence accumulated over centuries. Equality threatened all of it. Negotiations became long, sometimes tense, sometimes frustrating. Human economists dismantled unfair agreements line by line. Lawyers rewrote centuries of outdated treaties. Military officers designed security systems where no single civilization could dominate another. Weeks passed. Compromise replaced confrontation. Slowly, the framework of an empire transformed into a partnership. One evening, after another exhausting negotiation session, Ambassador Deary found Sarah standing alone beside the station's observation window. Beyond the glass, thousands of stars stretched into darkness. "You never wanted to rule us," Deary said quietly. Sarah smiled faintly. "No. You only wanted no one to rule you." "Exactly." Deary remained silent for several moments. "That," she finally admitted, "is a philosophy our history has never prepared us to understand." Sarah looked toward the stars. "Then maybe it's time history learned something new." Weeks later, the final charter was signed. No empire had been created. No civilization had surrendered. For the first time in recorded galactic history, peace rested not on fear, but on mutual recognition. Humanity had won the war. But its greatest victory wasn't defeating the enemy fleet. It was convincing former enemies that cooperation could be stronger than domination. The peace charter was signed. Across the galaxy, celebrations erupted. Trade routes reopened. Military checkpoints disappeared. Civilian ships crossed borders that had been closed for generations. News networks called it the beginning of a new era. Historians called it the end of the Age of Dominion. But inside humanity's strategic command, there were no celebrations. There was only silence. Because everyone understood one truth. Signing a treaty changed the future. It did not erase the past. The tribunal began 4 weeks later. Not on Earth. Not under human law. Humanity had insisted on something different. If justice was going to reshape the galaxy, it had to belong to everyone. Judges from multiple civilizations filled the chamber. Former allies. Former enemies. Independent observers. Human representatives sat quietly among them. Not as rulers. Not as victors. Simply as witnesses. The evidence spoke for itself. Decades of secret directives. Manipulated treaties. Hidden occupation plans. Civilian deception. Military coercion. One document after another revealed how the old alliance had transformed diplomacy into domination. No dramatic speeches were necessary. The truth was enough. High Admiral Kaler stood before the tribunal. For the first time in his career, there were no fleets behind him. No titles that carried authority. Only facts. When asked why he had continued the war despite overwhelming evidence, his answer surprised everyone. "I believed I was protecting civilization." The chamber remained silent. General Marcus Hale listened from the gallery. He didn't hate the man. In another life, under different circumstances, they might even have respected one another. Because the most dangerous leaders were rarely monsters. They were people who believed they were unquestionably right, and never stopped to ask whether they should be. The tribunal found Kaler guilty, not for losing the war, but for building one upon deception. Justice had spoken. Humanity never asked for a harsher sentence. As governments argued over history, Marcus Hale quietly disappeared. No farewell ceremony. No interviews. No victory parade. One morning, he simply left strategic command for the last time. He returned to the small coastal home he had abandoned nearly 4 decades earlier. The garden behind the house had survived. Wild, overgrown, patient. He spent the first afternoon pulling weeds, the second planting vegetables, the third fixing an old wooden fence. Neighbors occasionally recognized him. He smiled politely, then returned to his work. After 38 years spent preparing for humanity's survival, he finally allowed himself to live like an ordinary man. And he discovered, ordinary was something worth protecting. Elsewhere, Professor Ethan Park received every scientific honor imaginable. Universities competed to recruit him. Governments offered unlimited research funding. Military organizations wanted him to lead classified projects. He declined every offer. Instead, he boarded a civilian transport back to Kepler Colony. The station still carried scars from the war. Damaged habitats, broken infrastructure, families rebuilding their lives. Park looked at the destruction, then quietly picked up a toolbox. If we're going to build the future, he said, we should probably start with the ceiling. The engineers laughed, then went back to work. Sarah Voss faced a different decision. The newly formed Galactic Security Council offered her the highest military command ever created. She spent days reading the proposal. Not because she doubted the responsibility, because she understood its consequences. Command meant influence. Influence demanded wisdom. She remembered every negotiation, every mistake, every life that had depended on choosing the right words. Finally, she sent a single response. One word. Accepted. Not because she wanted authority, because someone had to protect the peace they had earned. Across human space, life slowly returned. Schools reopened. Shipyards built exploration vessels instead of warships. Children studied history that had been written only months before. Most of them would never understand how close humanity had come to disappearing. That ignorance, Marcus Hale believed, was the greatest victory of all. Because every generation should inherit safety, not the fear that created it. For the first time in decades, the galaxy stopped measuring humanity by its weapons. It began measuring humanity by what it chose to build after the fighting ended. And that choice would become far more influential than any battle ever fought. Peace changed the galaxy, faster than war ever had. The old military checkpoints vanished. Trade routes reopened. Scientists crossed borders that had been sealed for centuries. Explorers traveled without armed escorts. Across 18 human colonies, construction cranes replaced orbital defense platforms. Shipyards that had once produced destroyers now launched long-range survey vessels. Humanity wasn't preparing for another war. It was preparing for tomorrow. 3 months after the peace charter took effect, Sarah Voss stood inside the operations center of the newly formed Joint Exploration Command. The room looked different from every command center she had served in before. There were no red tactical warnings, no casualty reports, no enemy fleet movements. Instead, massive holographic star charts filled the room. Thousands of stars glowed beyond the former borders of the Concord. Most carried only one designation, unknown. For centuries, the Concord had believed it already understood the galaxy. The war had exposed a different truth. They had mapped only the parts they controlled. Beyond those borders, an ocean of unexplored space still waited. Sarah addressed the first gathering of human and allied exploration captains. You've spent your careers preparing to survive conflict. Your next mission is harder. You must learn how to prevent one. The room remained silent. Every captain understood. Weapons could force obedience. Only understanding could build lasting peace. The first expedition departed 2 days later. 6 survey ships. 3 human. 3 belonging to their newest allies. Their destination lay nearly 6 months beyond the furthest chart ever created by the old Concord. No one knew what waited there. That uncertainty excited humanity far more than it frightened them. Weeks into the journey, the fleet crossed the final navigation beacon. Behind them, civilized space disappeared from their sensors. Ahead, only darkness. Captain Elena Torres smiled as the last familiar star faded. Now, she whispered, the real map begins. The unknown answered sooner than expected. A long-range sensor operator noticed a faint transmission. Not military. Not commercial. Not even recognizable. It repeated every 19 minutes. Perfectly consistent. Perfectly artificial. The bridge fell silent. Humanity had spent decades preparing for powerful enemies. No one had prepared for a voice that had never met anyone at all. The signal led them to a star system absent from every Concord archive. Orbiting a pale blue giant, stood enormous structures unlike anything previously recorded. They weren't warships. They weren't stations. They resembled enormous musical instruments suspended in orbit. Each structure emitted harmonic pulses that echoed through space itself. No engines. No weapons. Only sound. Before anyone could decide what to do, another transmission arrived. This one was translated automatically, not because their computers understood the language, but because mathematics understood patterns. One sentence appeared across every display. Who are you? No threats. No demands. No declarations of superiority. Just curiosity. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Sarah smiled. It was the first contact, in which humanity wasn't the weaker civilization. And it was also the first, where strength no longer mattered. Earth's reply took almost an hour to compose. Not because the words were difficult, because history would remember the first sentence forever. Generations earlier, humanity might have answered with warnings, or military credentials, or declarations of power. Instead, Sarah approved a message containing only 12 words. We are humanity. We came to meet our neighbors, not to rule them. The transmission disappeared into the darkness. Minutes later, a reply arrived. Not text. Music. Complex. Beautiful. Completely alien. Yet somehow, hopeful. The bridge remained perfectly quiet as the melody filled the room. No one understood its meaning. Everyone understood its intention. Sarah looked beyond the viewport. Behind her stood a galaxy finally learning how to live together. Ahead waited civilizations that had never heard of empires, never witnessed the Great War, and had not yet decided what humanity was. She smiled. This time, humanity would introduce itself first. Not with fleets, not with fear, but with open hands. Because the greatest victory in history had never been winning the war. It had been earning the chance to begin again. The music arrived before the ships. 412 uninterrupted minutes. The strange melody flowed through every speaker aboard the exploration fleet. No translation software could decode it. No artificial intelligence could assign meaning to its structure. Yet every person listening felt the same thing. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a challenge. It was an introduction. A civilization speaking in the oldest language any intelligent species could understand. Curiosity. Hours later, the owners of that music finally appeared. 3 enormous vessels emerged from behind the blue giant. They carried no visible weapons, no attack formations, no targeting arrays. Their hulls shimmered with flowing patterns that shifted with every note still echoing through space. Even their engines seemed silent. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Not stronger, not weaker, simply different. Inside the lead vessel, the alien delegation made an unexpected request. They did not ask about Earth's military. They did not ask about technology. They asked a single question. Why did the old civilization speak of your species with both fear and admiration? The bridge fell silent. Every officer looked toward Sarah Voss. She had answered difficult questions before. None had ever mattered more than this one. She stepped toward the communications console, then spoke calmly. They feared what we could become. They admired what we chose instead. The translator paused, not because it had failed, because some ideas required time. The alien delegation remained silent. Sarah continued. We built powerful fleets. We created weapons capable of ending civilizations. We prepared for the worst because history demanded that we do so. But every weapon we built had one purpose: to make sure we would never need to use it. She looked through the viewport toward the endless stars. We learned something the hard way. Power can force surrender. It cannot create trust. Fear can win a battle. It cannot build a future. Our greatest victory wasn't defeating those who underestimated us. It was refusing to become like them after we won. Several long seconds passed. Then the alien representative answered. In our language, there is a word for a civilization that carries great strength without seeking dominion. It has no translation. We believe. It now belongs to you. Months passed. Trade began. Scientific exchanges followed. Musicians crossed the stars before soldiers ever did. Children on Earth learned songs written by beings they had never imagined existed. Alien students visited human universities. Human engineers helped build observatories around distant suns. The Joint Security Fleet still existed. Its patrols continued, not because another war had begun, but because peace deserved guardians too. General Marcus Hale watched much of it from the porch of his small home. The tomatoes had grown taller than expected. The garden needed constant attention. He preferred it that way. One evening, a young journalist finally found him. She carried a recorder, a notebook, and one question. General, history says you won the war. What do you think people should remember? Marcus looked across the quiet garden. He thought about hidden relay networks, 40 years of preparation, bad coffee and underground bunkers, friends who never lived to see peace, and a galaxy that had finally stopped trying to decide humanity's future without humanity. Then he smiled. They'll probably remember the battles. He gently brushed dirt from his hands. I hope they remember why we fought them. Years became decades. The old Concord faded into history books. Its borders disappeared. Its doctrines became case studies in military academies. Humanity's first contact with the musical civilization became the beginning of an age historians would later call the era of open stars. An age where exploration mattered more than conquest. Discovery mattered more than domination. Cooperation mattered more than control. Far beyond Earth's skies, new survey ships continued disappearing into unexplored space. Each carried the same message prepared decades earlier by Sarah Voss. Not a warning. Not a demand. An introduction. We are humanity. We come in peace. We ask only what every civilization deserves. The freedom to choose its own future. And wherever those words arrived, humanity was no longer judged by the wars it had survived, nor by the weapons it had built, but by the remarkable decision it had made after becoming powerful enough to rule everyone. Chose not to, because in the end, the strongest civilization in the galaxy was never the one that conquered the stars. It was the one that made the stars feel safe enough to welcome strangers home.